If you pretend to be Indigenous for the purpose of accessing Indigenous benefits, funding, or prestige, you will be found out. We will find you.
Tonight, a Liberal cabinet minister has stepped down from his duties following his shifting Indigenous identity claims.
The park was a place of gathering, it was coming together.
A number of Treaty 3 chiefs have filed a claim asking for Anishinaabe Park to be given back.
It's a very rich part of history that we don't hear often enough, and we thought there was a lot of things that we could dig in and tell with Two Falls.
And a new video game with an Indigenous lens hopes to shine a light on the country's history. Good evening, I'm Kristen Achkate. Welcome to APTN National News. An update now to a cabinet minister who has had shifting Indigenous ancestry claims and co-owns a business that applied for a federal grant in 2020 that was specifically for Indigenous-owned businesses. Federal Employment Cabinet Minister and MP for Edmonton Centre, Randy Boissonnault, has stepped down from cabinet, according to the Prime Minister's office. In that statement, it says Prime Minister Trudeau and Boissonnault both came to an agreement that Boissonnault would be stepping away from his ministerial duties, effective immediately, to focus on clearing the allegations made against him. Meanwhile, Veterans Affairs Minister Jeanette Pettipas-Taylor will temporarily assume responsibility for Boissonnault's portfolios in addition to her current duties. In the past, Boissonnault has called himself a non-status adopted Cree and claimed his great-grandmother was a full-blooded Cree woman, but has since walked back those claims, instead saying she was Métis. Boissonnault also said the business grant incident was done without his knowledge, and that in the end his business did not successfully qualify for the grant. APTN News has reached out to Boissonnault's office for a comment, but did not hear back. We are now joined by Cree and Métis Edmonton NDP MP Blake Desjardins, who is currently in Ottawa to talk about Randy Boissonnault's resignation from cabinet. NDP MP Blake Desjardins, thank you for speaking with us. My first question is, what is your reaction to this new statement from the PMO and Boissonnault stepping away from cabinet?
Thanks so much for the question. It's always good to be here to talk directly to Indigenous people. And I think many of them, like me today, are relieved that finally we get some kind of justice for those who've taken advantage of systems that were designed to put money in the hands of Indigenous people. We've seen right across the country and time again that when these instances of pretendians come up, that it's often pushed under the rug or no one talks about it. And that has real victims. Indigenous people are the real victims of this. Indigenous businesses, Indigenous communities, and real Indigenous entrepreneurs that actually want to be able to get the job done while providing and contributing to our economy. What former Minister Boissonnault did was take the money out of the hands of Indigenous people by pretending to be someone he wasn't. That is brutally racist, and something that I think Indigenous people have been calling and sounding the alarm for a long time. So today, I'm very happy that the Prime Minister finally, after weeks and weeks and weeks of this, has done the right thing and asked and come to an agreement with Randy Boissonnault to step down.
Blake, how do you think Boissonnault should spend his time away from cabinet to address this?
He has said in defense of his claims that he has just now live time doing the work of understanding who he is. He should have done that work 10 years ago when he started on this journey, and he should have been able to have the courage to do that work before applying for money. He should take the opportunity now to reflect deeply on what he knows to be true. Many Canadians don't know what's true right now because the facts he's presenting are always changing. So it's up to him to balance and to reflect whether or not he's fit to serve as the MP for Edmonton Centre.
You talked about it a bit there, but what do you make of Boissonnault's shifting Indigenous identity claims and this incident involving his business?
This is classic telltale signs of pretendingism. We often see this as a red flag when we need to address this issue. We see these persons attempting to race shift, and this race shift kind of moves back and forth and creates this position where we don't really know who they are. And we have evidence of that with Mr. Boissonnault. He first started to say that he was Cree, that his great-grandmother was full-blooded Cree. And then he went on to say that his brother and mother who are adoptive parent or adoptive relatives were Métis, and then he went on to say he's non-status Métis, and now he's saying he's not sure about that. That is a red flag. Anytime where we see someone who is not clear as to who they are, where they're from, especially when they're applying for money or jobs, is a serious red flag. And I think this is part and parcel of what we need to see as part of our framework moving forward as ways to raise the alarm. When people do this, it should raise everyone's questions.
Finally, do you think we will see similar Indigenous identity questions for other political leaders on the Hill in the near future?
I think whoever purports to be Indigenous for the purpose of political or financial benefit must be held accountable for who they are. Whether that you're applying for a grant as an individual from a community or you're a minister of a country, every single one of them need to be held accountable and need to be proud. I'm very proud to say I'm from the Fishing Lake Métis settlement. I'm very proud to know relatives I grew up with. I'm really proud to know many Indigenous people who've done the hard work of building a company, doing all the paperwork, picking themselves up, and then having to be met by a rigged system here in Ottawa is completely unacceptable. Indigenous people in the age of reconciliation, we've had enough of it, and we will crack down on anyone who attempts to use our identity for their own personal interests.
NDP MP Blake Desjardins, thank you for your time. We'll have to leave it there.
Thank you so much.
On that same topic, during question period, the Conservatives were on the attack and grilled the Liberals over the sudden cabinet change.
And up until a minute ago, he had a minister with a double identity. The Prime Minister knew that the minister was directing his business illegally from inside cabinet. He knew the minister had claimed there was another Randy when there was no other Randy. He knew that the minister had falsely claimed to be Indigenous in order to take money away from real Indigenous people, and yet he stood by him up until yesterday. Why is it that he always stands up for corruption on his own side?
The member for Edmonton Centre has stepped down from cabinet to focus on clearing these allegations. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition talks about the importance of speaking up. The reality is his MPs are no longer voices for their communities. They are his voice in their communities. That's not how this place is supposed to work.
To northwestern Ontario now, where 3 First Nations say they are preparing for one of the biggest legal battles in their community's history. They claim they have rightful ownership of a park within the city of Kenora. With more, here's T.R. Wheatley.
What exactly happened here at Anishinaabe Park?
On this wet November day, Chief Chris Skeed of Wajashk Onagum reflects on traditional teachings as he prepares himself for a legal battle.
Through Gimiwan, which is rain, for Mother Earth to cleanse herself. To me, I see it as getting support from our Creator in a discussion such as this.
With the drum at the center, Skeed and 2 neighboring First Nations, Waskaganish Bay and Nisatchewin, gather inside this bingo hall to tell their band members they are heading to court, as they have submitted a statement of claim against the city of Kenora and Canada. At issue, Anishinaabe Park was illegally taken from them 50 years back.
I feel like the park was a place of gathering, it was coming together, it was building relationships. It really was a place of healing.
In 1974, an occupation by the Ojibwe War Society occurred on these lands, gaining international headlines.
My great uncle Louis Cameron was the one that spearheaded the whole occupation. I wasn't born at the time when it all happened, but just knowing the history about it and reading it, learning about it more.
Across the lake at the park, Jeanette Skeed takes a walk down memory lane. In 74, she recalls her late husband was in the middle of the dispute.
At that time, that he was a mediator, so between the police, OPP, and 33.
Their daughter Sally was also one of 80 youth on the front lines.
They had guns and everything, so it was hard for us as parents. There was always this fear of what was going to happen.
Skeed recalls seeing supports from all over Turtle Island come and go, including some from the American Indian movement.
And we met Dennis Banks at that time, just from a wounded knee and that.
After 6 weeks of tension, the occupation ended peacefully with an agreement that the land would be returned. While there are some signs of reconciliation and land acknowledgements in Kenora, there is still no land back.
The city of Kenora had opportunity to do the right thing, and that was return the land to its rightful owners.
The city and the Attorney General of Canada have until the end of the month to file a statement of defense. Neither have responded to APTN on whether or not they will. But given how much time has passed, Skeed believes one will be filed. He hopes it can be resolved with Ontario's Superior Court, but is prepared to go all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada.
We're in a process of healing right now, and a big part of the healing is land. Since time immemorial, we've done our ceremonies, our clothing, our way of life.
Vowing to protect the land like his ancestors set out to do half a century ago. T.R. Wheatley, APTN National News, Kenora.
Yesterday, Manitoba's speech from the throne unveiled the province's commitments for a legislative session. Today, we heard reaction from Indigenous leadership. The commitments to Indigenous communities in Manitoba included creating a Department of Natural Resources and Indigenous Futures in the Swan River area, offering an Indigenous loan guarantee for energy projects, and bringing Indigenous languages back into the classroom. Southern Chiefs Organization Grand Chief Jerry Daniels urged the government to act on its promises immediately. Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Acting Grand Chief Betsy Kennedy welcomed action on other commitments to housing shortages, addictions, and northern health care. And she urged the government to support First Nations Child and Family Services reform. The speech also noted a wind power partnership with First Nations and Métis. Manitoba Métis Federation President David Chartrand explained its importance.
We also know that hydro is very, very worried about the future, not only with their debt, but at the same time with the cost of the need of more people wanting hydro and business needing hydro. The electric cars are coming, and if that comes, it's gonna be high demand of more electrical powers. So this new announcement made by the government, they're going to sit down with my government and sit down with the First Nation government and negotiate the 600 megawatt of power.
We're always looking for your feedback or story ideas. Here's how you can continue the conversation with us. If you have a story you want to share, send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, go to aptnnews.ca. You can also follow us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. Today is Transgender Remembrance Day. We'll tell you how the day is being remembered after the break in about 3 minutes. Welcome back. An independent council with the goal of advising the Yukon government on matters of Arctic security released its final report on Tuesday. The Yukon Arctic Security Advisory Council's report says the territory is relatively safe and well defended against military threats from places like Russia and China. The report makes several recommendations to enhance security. Some of them are expanding and enhancing support to the Canadian Rangers throughout the Yukon, maintaining reliable energy, transportation, and communications infrastructure, and establishing a specialized militia unit based in Whitehorse. The report's recommendations will be presented to the federal government next month. Council Chair Ken Coates says that while territory is fairly isolated from global security issues, it needs to be prepared.
The isolation sort of leaves us to think the world doesn't matter to us too much. Well, I can assure you the world matters an awful lot. And it matters more than it did 5 years ago. And it's probably going to matter even more 5 years and 10 years and 15 years down the line.
The Nisitchewayesik Cree Nation in northern Manitoba is adding new measures to its state of emergency to crack down on violence and illegal activity. A chief's bulletin published Monday said that alcohol, drug use, bootlegging, illegal drug activity, and gang violence are causing increased violence in the community. The Cree Nation has been under a state of emergency since July of 2023. Recently, a 13-year-old boy was critically injured in a drive-by shooting while he was sleeping in his room. Starting December 2nd, NCN will limit the amount of alcohol and cannabis that can be brought into the community. A curfew for children under 18 will be in effect from 8 p.m. to 7 a.m., and all home-based businesses must close by 11 p.m. No visitors or non-NCN members will be allowed entry between midnight and 6 a.m. Members caught bootlegging, selling illegal drugs, or threatening violence may be evicted or banished. NCN says more measures may be added if the violence doesn't stop. The Chiefs of Ontario and the Ontario First Nations Young People's Council is highlighting an important day this week. Today is Transgender Day of Remembrance, a day for family and community members to remember transgender people who have lost their life to violence and discrimination. Young People's Council co-chair Kieran Davis says the day recognizes that violence and hate directed at gender diverse people stems from systems and attitudes that need to change. They say diversity in gender and identity has always existed, and it's time to reclaim respect and understanding and draw strength from Indigenous teachings. Transgender Day of Remembrance started in 1999 in the United States to honor Rita Hester, a trans woman who was killed in Massachusetts. It's estimated 1.6 million people in the U.S. between 13 years old and older identify as transgender and are 4 times more likely to be victims of violence. More than 40,000 people took to the streets and protested at New Zealand's Parliament this week over a proposed bill that could affect treaty rights. The Maori say the proposed changes will reverse progress for the Maori, while those behind the bill say all New Zealanders should have the same rights. 42,000 people carried the Maori national flag and protest signs, calling for New Zealand lawmakers to reject the Treaty Principles Bill, which was introduced earlier in the month by the Libertarian Act New Zealand Party. The New Zealand Party do not have enough seats to pass the bill on their own, but Maori people say if passed, the bill would arbitrarily change the Treaty of Waitangi, signed with Britain in 1840. The Maori make up about 20% of New Zealand's population. Similar to Indigenous people in Canada, the Maori have higher levels of poverty, incarceration, and poor health. This protest comes after a Maori MP ripped up a copy of the bill in Parliament and led her colleagues in a haka last Thursday. A new video game with an Indigenous lens hopes to teach a part of history in this country developers say isn't talked about enough. That story when we're back in less than 3 minutes. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Our very own Sarah Connors sent a picture of her hairless cats, Yoko and Lilix, casually enjoying the day. We sure hope these are indoor cats, Sarah, because it's getting cold outside. Brr. Thanks for sharing, Sarah. For your chance to be our next photo of the day, send us your photos to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east, rain in St. John's at 6, Charlottetown 8. Cartwright 4, La Grande River 5. Quebec City 7 in rain, St. Jovite 7 as well. London 3, Toronto 6. Wawa 5, Thunder Bay 7. Churchill -2, Puckatawagan -5. -3 in Winnipeg, Barons River -2. -8 in Regina, -11, snow in Saskatoon. -10 in La Ronge, Buffalo Narrows -12. Partly cloudy and high level at -19, Fort McMurray -15. -7 in Medicine Hat, Red Deer -9 and snowy rain. Tofino 9, Vancouver 9 as well. -20 in Fort Nelson, Dees Lake -21 in sun. Mayo -21, Dawson -26. -19 in Wati, Norman Wells -15. -15 in Sax Harbor, Inuvik -12. Whale Cove -1, Chesterfield -1 as well. and Iqaluit -5, Aglulik -6. A new video game has been developed that shines light on the 17th century history using an Indigenous voice. According to the creators, this is the first game made in Quebec from an Indigenous perspective. Kim Sullivan tells us more.
The cheering is well-deserved. These video game creators worked hard for months to finally see their production go live. Two Falls, Nishutakuachina was developed by Unreliable Narrators, an independent video game studio in Montreal. The game's composer and sound designer, art director, actors, and story writer are all members of various First Nations communities. The studio's goal is to make players reflect on today's society through rich storytelling, giving a voice to those who are too often ignored.
We wanted to meet this to talk about the 17th century history, where the French and Indigenous community meet their first meeting, and it's a very rich part of history that we don't hear often enough, and we thought there was a lot of things that we could dig in and tell with Two Falls.
Two Falls offers a powerful narrative that interweaves the journey of two young individuals. Jeanne, a young woman from France who shipwrecks in the New World, and Maikan, a young Innu hunter whose instincts tell him that something is disturbing the forest. Players will take turns embodying each character, discovering their unique realities and cultures. Iatse, who is Wendat, says through two distinct artistic directions and soundtracks, players will experience two ways of seeing, hearing, and feeling the world.
Yeah, I went with two different perspectives and I used different instruments for both of them. So for Jeanne, it was more like orchestral and with strings, and Maikan was more like with percussions, Indigenous percussions such as the Hiandarqua, which was the hand drum, and the rattle is the Yastawansha. So I always use the same instruments for both of them, and I try to as well go in emotions, and you can somehow recognize from the melodies in both perspectives, you can recognize the same emotion, but it's different because I'm using different instruments.
Bertium says the same events can have very different meanings, which will lead players to question certain preconceptions and, in doing so, allow them to better understand Indigenous cultures.
It doesn't shy away from very sensitive themes and tackles with a lot of nuance, and it wants to make you think and understand and recognize what happened in the 17th century and the centuries afterwards.
The studio not only worked closely with Indigenous creative minds, but also approached a council of Innu and Wendat elders to ensure that the message was representative.
We have a council of elders who validated everything that we brought into the game, from messages, themes, historical accuracy, their culture, what elements we can show and what we cannot show. So they have been a very huge integral part of the production and creation.
Two Falls is now available for streaming and on Epic Games Store. Kim Sullivan, APTN National News, Montreal.
That looks like a fun game. I'm definitely going to check it on our PlayStation. And that's your evening newscast for this Wednesday, November 20th. From everyone at our HQ in Winnipeg and from our reporters across the country, hi, miigwech, masicho. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next day.